I will call the meeting to order. The first order of business is item number 1 on the agenda, the approval of the agenda. I need a motion for that.
I'll move approval of agenda.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded that the agenda be approved. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. We're on item number 2, which is public comment on matters not on the agenda. And I have Victoria Yokoyama is wanting to speak on this item.
And was that recorded? Okay. Again, I'm Victoria Yokoyama, and I represent 3000 South River Road, and this is the Yokoyama Farm, and it's my parents' legacy. It's remains our family home, and we are also farming it as we traditionally have for the last 3 decades. One of the things that was brought to my attention by my northern neighbor is that one of their requests for reconsideration had been denied. So at this point, I am relying on the Flood Control Agency's letter dated September 6th that there will be consideration to reduce the footprint on our property, and hopefully at that it will also consider perhaps a hybrid levee, and that it may save our river frontage, part of our river frontage, and definitely our home, which is our primary objective. So I'm here again speaking on our desire that that be a major concern and consideration of the Flood Control Agency, and hopefully we'll be able to move forward in that direction. Also, I'd like to inform you at this time we will be working with Mark Gilbert, and he's from NGO and a consultant, and he helped our neighbors in Section B. And he will be going over the records that were provided for us by Kenrick Jamison. And Kenrick has given me an extensive amount of information that, as a layman, I have poured over and came to my own conclusions. But at this time, it would be better if we had expertise explaining to us the geological considerations involved in this process. And I need to answer to my family also and why these decisions are made, not only in just my terms, but also with a geotechnological expert. At this time, I am also requesting that we do and I could get that information from Mr. Jamison, that we get the final analysis of the core sample that was taken on our property on May 10th. And I would also like to have, if that's available, the cone penetration test results on the Seacon property. There were 2 tests taken on August 16th. It may not be available, but Mr. Jamison could advise us whether or not this is possible. Also, I'd like to note that Blackburn graciously contacted me about taking another sample off of our property at the toe of the levee for consideration of using our site for borrow dirt, and I waived that test because we are not intending to release any of our soil for the levee construction. And thank you very much.
Thank you. No other public comment then? We'll go to item number 3, the approval of the September the 13th minutes.
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes that are held.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we approve the September the 13th minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Item number 4, the review of our monthly year-to-date revenue and expenses.
Morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. This cash flow report summarizes receipts and expenditures for the month of August 2012. For the month of August, there were no receivables, and expenditures totaled $85,562, and there was a second debt service payment of $989,139. Finance closed the books for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2012 Working off the MBK DWR true-up statements, we were able to access additional state funding accounts and pull in some more into Fund 870's balance. So the fiscal year position starting for fiscal year 2012-13 improved to $12.4 million. Also, we did an estimate on the retention from the constructed EIP projects, I Street, Rivers, and CHP. And we think there's a estimated $2.1 million retention out there, too, that will eventually make its way back to WSAFCA. It's worth noting, though, that project closeout is pretty complicated and can take quite a while to do, so it may be a while before we see that money returned to our accounts. That concludes the monthly cash flow report.
Any questions?
No questions.
The only question I thought, you said 12,400 something thousand dollars. I thought it was $12,603.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. I'm counting
Okay,
the wrong balance. Yeah,
Okay.
it's at 12.603.
right. Okay, thank you.
No further questions? I need a motion to accept the,
Also move.
Second?
been moved and seconded, we accept the review. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Consideration of contract award to Bender Rosenthal Incorporation for appraisal negotiation, relocation, and related services for the Sacramento River Southport EIP. The staff is recommending that we award this contract to them. They've probably the most experienced contractor that we have that could do that. Matter of fact, they are the most experienced. Need a motion then to accept this.
You want it?
Staff report?
Oh, pardon me, go ahead.
I'm perfectly fine if you'd like to approve the contract without a presentation.
Well,
Thank you, Chairman Denton and members of the WSAFCA Board. I'm here to represent or to bring forward to you a contract for Bender Rosenthal Incorporated for appraisal, negotiation, relocation, and other related right-of-way services. As you know, Bender Rosenthal was selected through a process that we normally do. We put out an RFQ to 6 reputable agencies that are active throughout the state. We received back 6 proposals. Those proposals were reviewed by myself, Mark Zolo, and Kendrick Jameson. We rated those proposals. We also gave copies of those proposals to Ken Rusich. We deliberated on them and selected 3 groups to interview with us. We interviewed them in the week of August 20th. Ken Rusich sat in on those interviews. We also brought in Raul Huerta from our Community Development Department, who is really the only city employee who has completed and implemented a relocation plan. That was really useful in our discussions with them, our interviews with them. Just for the public's knowledge, I mean, we asked them questions we feel were relevant to affected property owners for the South River Southport EIP. We asked how they were organized and how they would be able to cooperate with WSAFCA staff. We asked questions related to acquisition and relocation services for properties that are still in agricultural use. We asked them to explain how they would work with property owners who would like to be able to perhaps move their house landward of where it currently is but still remain on their parcel. And we asked about the range of relocation services that would be available for them. After the interviews were conducted, we came to consensus that Bender Rosenthal has the most experience, especially working with flood control agencies, as well as their experience with the real estate division at the Department of Water Resources. After that, we engaged. We had about 2 or 3 weeks before the board meeting, so we had active discussions about the contract. We held them to the current cost for appraisals for the next 2 years. And we also made sure that the hours that they were putting into the contract would be ample to make sure that residents who are going to be affected will get the services that they need, both in terms of appraisal as well as relocation services. The other thing that I want to just go on record, I know that there's a lot of confusion or a lot of concern about when are these services going to roll out. So let me just kind of go down a little bit of, let me provide a little bit of information of that. Generally, the services will follow the order that they are in the contract attachment A. So between now and the end of the calendar year, as the 15% design drawings go to 65%, we'll be engaging in a planning process to develop a management plan as well as a property owner communications plan. During that time, we will be scheduling at least one public sort of meeting for Bender Rosenthal to present their services to property owners. We haven't decided on that yet, but after we get into the contract, that will be coming very soon. Once the next level of design is achieved, I will be directing Mark Thomas and Company to start developing new parcel descriptions. They're the surveyor for real estate, as well as legal descriptions and map exhibits, so that appraisal services could commence. They'll be reaching out to property owners then after the beginning of the year, probably in the latter part of the first quarter, as we move to get the environmental document approved. Those appraisals will be more firm. Bender Rosenthal has agreed to and will be directed to try to meet with property owners on three separate occasions to try to come to an agreement when it comes to a property or real estate purchase. In addition, they will also be developing a comprehensive real estate plan, which will be implemented on a property owner by property owner basis. And ultimately, they will provide us with some support services to make sure that we can clear title and convey properties back to the Department of Water Resources. So we're asking for a contract approval of $1,228,000, allowing the general manager to change the contract by up to 10% between line items, and a contingency of another $122,000. Rebecca Green is here from Bender Rosenthal if you have any questions specific about the services or the staff that will be assigned. But that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. I have a question. The approach that you're going to take with those farms that are harvesting now or growing crops now, how are they going to handle that?
So there will probably be two separate meetings. There'll be a property owner meeting, and there'll be a discussion with the tenant. So given the amount of work we've done in terms of trying to get rights of entry, we're aware of who are some of the most active farming entities, and so we'll be reaching out to them separately.
Need a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we award the contract to Bender and Rosenthal for appraisal, negotiation, relocation, and related services for the Sacramento River Southport Early Implementation Project.
I'll second the motion.
Been moved and seconded that we award the contract as presented by staff. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Item number 6, consideration and approval of agency resolution to apply for DWR-directed funding of the Lower Sacramento Delta North Regional Flood Management Plan. The levee improvements and maintaining agencies in Sacramento, Solano, and Yolo counties have asked the West Sacramento Area Flood Control Association to be the lead agency for preparing the Lower Sacramento Delta North Regional Flood Management Plan. And DWR is expected to accept applications for grants to fund regional flood managing planning in October. This agreement item request approval for the West Sacramento Flood Control General Manager to submit the grant application to the Department of Water Resources.
Thank you very much, Chairman Denton. This is an item that we discussed or began a discussion at the last board meeting. The Central Valley Flood Protection Board adopted the 2012 Central Valley Flood Protection Plan, as was required by Senate Bill 5. And the first step in implementing that plan and moving toward the 2017 update of the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan is a process called Regional Flood Management Planning. DWR designated 9 different regions within the Sacramento River and San Joaquin River basins, and WSAFCA is within the region called Lower Sacramento River. We have been in very vigorous conversations with local levee maintaining agencies, municipalities, counties, and stakeholders in the region, as well as the region to the south of us called Delta North, to try to come up with a regional designation that makes the most sense for everybody in the area. The way that DWR had mapped the regions would have split the Yolo bypass, which is really one of the central features in the state's flood protection system for the Central Valley, into 3 separate planning areas. And this did not seem to be efficient, and the agencies that relate to the Yolo bypass felt that some consolidation was advisable. And so at this point, the agencies around us in Sacramento, Yolo, Solano, and Sutter counties that immediately relate to the Yolo bypass and Sacramento River in our area have decided that we're going to hook up into a regional planning process called Lower Sacramento River and Delta North, and that the agencies together will consolidate a governance process for the regional flood management plan. And the first step is to submit an application to DWR to provide state funding for that planning effort. WSAFCA has been selected by our regional partners to be the single local liaison to DWR for the purposes of grant administration. So in accordance with DWR's guidelines for the grant funding process, your board is required to authorize the general manager to submit a grant application, and that essentially is the action in front of you today. The collaborative that's working for the region is well down the path of drafting a scope of work and a grant application process. It will be distributed in its draft form to the 2 coordinating committees on either side of the Sacramento River. Each of the coordinating committees consists of all of the local players that are engaged in flood risk reduction on both sides of the river. So this draft will be distributed sometime this week, and the 2 coordinating committees will gather at a plenary session in town just across the street on the 25th to approve the final grant application process and planning scope of work. So this is a very detailed and entirely collaborative effort of all the flood maintaining agencies and local jurisdictions in our region. It's going to be a fast planning process. We only have until the end of 2013 to conclude the work, so it's going to go quickly. It's going to be very, very busy. But again, the measure or the action in front of the board today is just that first step to let us go ahead and submit the grant application to DWR. That concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
I think this has been answered once before, but maybe you could answer it again. Is that the total cost? What's it going to cost West Sacramento Flood Control Association to head up this group?
Very good question. There are 2 components, 2 big components of cost. One is the cost to get into the game, if you will, the costs that are incurred in advance of DWR's directed funding, and then those that that will be reimbursed 100% by the state. As we just discussed at our last meeting with you, the cost to to submit the grant application are being incurred by, at a 50-50 split between WSAFCA and SAFCA. We estimate those costs to be under $50,000 in total. Subsequent costs, again, we're going through the budget exercise right now. I expect that the grant requests will run the range between $1 to $1.75 million. And again, this is supposed to be a 100% funding allocation from the state.
We get our money back.
That is our expectation.
Yeah, Dave, how far-reaching is the state's original plan? Is this plan? I mean, one of the reasons that West Sacramento is concerned about this, and that is because as we do our overall city planning and things, this could reach into, or could put us into a reach that has, in essence, another layer of government. And I know that the city of West Sacramento is concerned about it, Rio Vista is concerned about it, and some of the other the Delta towns and communities are concerned about this other layer of government having some kind of control or some kind of influence on future planning developments. And so is that what this is really all about, or is there something more to it than that?
Mr. Kristoff, as I understand the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan, it is the state's strategy, system-wide strategy for investment of state monies in flood risk reduction. It in and of itself does not create a kind of a land use dimension. Now, there is a component, a partner component called the urban level of flood protection, which is also mandated by Senate Bill 5, which sets forth a set of criteria for local governments to essentially certify that when they make decisions about land use that increase the population within protected floodplains, that the local agency is at the same time either working to provide 200-year level of protection, in our case as an urban area, or already has it. This is different than, say, the imposition of some sort of regional authority that would in some way influence or alter West Sacramento's sovereign decision-making authority over land use. So,
Okay.
to try to drill in more specifically, the thrust of the regional flood management process is to establish a framework for state investment in flood risk reduction projects. It is not about land use per se.
Okay, thank you.
Need a-
I have a question.
Okay.
You estimated a grant of approximately $1.75 million. How's that money spent? Consultants that do
Yep.
process, and who manages that? Or the approving contract?
Very good question. Director Ramos, the WSAFCA's role will be primarily as a fiscal agent, so a fiscal administrator. The grant will be between DWR and WSAFCA. WSAFCA will have the authority to essentially hold contracts for sub-consultants and consultants working on the project. WSAFCA will also be wheeling grant monies to other agencies that are receiving funding for their participation in the regional flood management planning process. Beyond the kind of our fiscal agency, we have one of the main seats at the table. Certainly, we'll have great access to the planning process. But the authority, the decision-making authority for specific actions, setting priorities, identifying projects, that will be vested in the entire collaborative because it's a region-wide process. So I hope that answers your questions about governance overall and our fiscal agency responsibilities.
To us if there's possible.
Great question. We'll have to see how the grant forms up to see what level of liability is incurred by WSAFCA for funding changes. I don't have a clear answer for you at this point, but I will certainly pursue it. We will certainly be building in contingency values for the work.
Oh, I have a question. You mentioned the urban. Will this stretch into the rural areas at all?
Yes, sir. Director Lang, the geographic area for the Regional Flood Management Plan encompasses the area from roughly the Knights Landing Ridge Cut all the way down to Rio Vista, so north-south. On the west side of Woodland, all the way to the east edge of incorporated city of Sacramento. So it's a broad geography encompassing urban areas, small communities, rural areas, and one of the important components of the regional flood management planning process is to articulate in a manner perhaps analogous to the level of detail for flood control guidance that's been provided for urban areas, is to articulate a similar type of criteria set or framework for deciding the appropriate level of flood protection for small communities and rural areas.
Question to you, since this money will all be used for studies, will there be any money afterwards for the rural areas to improve the levees, or is this another study?
This is another study.
No money, this study. Okay.
No, this is planning money. In the sequence of things, we've got to take this step in order to chase money for physical improvements. That's the mandate that the state has created for us. We believe this is our best opportunity to help the state more accurately understand the needs of small communities and rural areas, and to strategically and efficiently allocate the remaining funds left in Prop 1E and 84 capacity for flood risk reduction, for hard improvements.
I forgot to turn it off.
Certainly.
SAFCA is one of our partners in this group.
Yes.
Are they supportive of our
More specifically, they were one of the agencies that asked WSAFCA to take the lead. This is a complicated region, a region that not just complicated from geography or they're kind of the breadth and variety of flood risk reduction issues and needs. But it's also complicated because of the mix of jurisdictions. You've got these two large consolidated rural areas that are very busy and quite successful in making progress in improving flood risk reduction for their communities. But you also have a large constellation of smaller entities that are doing their best just to get by, just to maintain the levee sufficiently to hold on to their PL 8499 qualification certification. That mix of entities creates governance complexities, and in some ways concern about whose interests are going to lead versus whose interests are going to be overlooked. And so in the region where WSAFCA is certainly seen as the highly experienced and very technically capable organization that's moving a large ball fast down the road, it is not broadly perceived as the appropriate entity to represent the breadth of issues that are not necessarily about urban Sacramento. SAFCA, as a smaller organization, as a somewhat younger organization, is seen as more able to bridge this divide, or perceived divide, not actual, between the urban core interests and those of smaller communities or rural areas, the RDs in the planning region. We also, if one starts to look at institutional capacity, once one gets past SAFCA, there's not a lot of institutional capacity to run this kind of planning process, or to certainly act as a fiscal agent. And we have that combination of position as well as available capacity to act in this role.
Could you provide the board with a plot plan and outline of the area that's going to be?
Absolutely. How would members of the board like to receive that map? Would you like to see it electronically, or shall we distribute it to you via mail on hard copy? Prefer a print? Certainly.
Okay. I need a motion to approve resolution 12-10-01.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of resolution 12-10-1 as required by DWR as part of the grant application in funding for the Lower Sacramento Delta North Regional Flood Management Plan.
And I'll second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, the ayes have it.
Thank you very much.
Just a quick comment. I think this is a good thing as far as WSAFCA is concerned. It really puts us as a lead agency for especially the bypass and everything that happens from the various weirs that are north to all of the other floodgates and things that are connected to the bypass, and we'll get a very good, in essence, study out of this, and I think we'll receive some very good data. I just hope that in the process of all of that data that some of the negative things that could possibly pop up are get resolved. And so I think this is a pretty good thing. I think there's enough safety built in from the grant process and everything to adequately fund it. And so anyway, this is, I think it's a good thing.
Thank you very much for your support.
I think it's a good thing to do, but you still got to remember, if we keep studying and don't do anything on the ground, and a flood comes to the rural areas, it's totally worthless.
Understood.
Okay, the item number 7, project updates.
Thank you very much, Chairman Denton. I have to apologize that the flood protection progress report was omitted from the board's packet. Apologize for that. We can mail those out as well with the regional flood planning area map. So I'll just quickly touch on a few items, and if you have other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Just a quick update on the 2011 EIPs. At the Rivers Phase 1 site, riparian mitigation planting is ongoing. The recent stage of work has completed installation of irrigation piping as well as control wiring. Unfortunately, we've encountered some vandalism out at the site, both against the sedimentation controls and have suffered some loss of copper wire due to theft, and so that's going to complicate our work. But the contractor is going to certainly replace that wire and look at another way of installing it to make it a bit more difficult to be pulled out. As we reported to the board at the last meeting, as Public Works Director Bill Panos gave a briefing on Section 221 crediting and negotiations with the Army Corps of Engineers Assistant Secretary for Civil Works, we have again been rebuffed by the ASA, which is disappointing, but are in the process now of taking a look at different ways to respond to that circumstance, both in direct correspondence with the ASA, but also in conversations with our congressional delegations about the potential for legislation to resolve this issue. Moving on to the Southport Early Implementation Project, a couple pieces of news. Staff and the consultant team delivered the second administrative draft EIS to the Army Corps of Engineers, Department of Water Resources, Central Valley Flood Protection Board, and Department of Fish and Wildlife in the state for internal review. This is a major milestone, and we're glad that we were able to move through it. We'll be having a series of informational meetings with agency staff so that everyone's on the same page and looking through the document. It's, as you would expect, it's getting big fast, and so we're doing what we can to facilitate those administrative reviews. Other activities, there's a tremendous amount of field work going on in support of the 65% design process. The SCS engineers, which has been retained to provide environmental site assessment services, is working through the process of up to 65 soil testing on 65 agricultural properties in the Southport area. The issue here is characterization of agricultural chemical contaminants, which would really not be of any surprise to anybody, but it's essentially trying to characterize, for the most part, worker safety exposure during construction. And staff is working directly with property owners to gain permission for access, and we are specifically careful about interruption of any harvest activities, so scheduling of site reviews or inspections will be timed to accommodate those ongoing agricultural operations. Subsequent to the board's action on in accepting the Segment B VE study, staff has been working closely with property owners in segments B and C to work through local access issues. The project will extend an interim phase of Village Parkway to a dead-end position at the Clarksburg Branch Line Trail. And as a result of the loss of South River Road on the levee, the WSAFCA must provide alternative access to private property so that none of those are landlocked. We've had a series of very productive conversations. The design is refining. The design layout, concept layout is being refined, and we'll be following up a little later this month with property owners to get one last check-in with them before we give direction to the design team for 65% design. It's been a very productive set of interactions. We're grateful for them. The schedule for delivering 65% design to the community and to the board is at this time set for early in January 2013. Moving on to the Army Corps of Engineers General Reevaluation Report, just a quick update here. It appears that in the process of adapting to the Corps' new planning regimen, that we may be approaching a scope and schedule and budget reset charrette, and this is essentially probably end up being a multi-day meeting with district, division, and headquarters staff about the Sacramento area, the West Sacramento GRR. And it looks like we're going to be able to schedule something in November, which is great, because we're eager to keep pace there. That document is crucial for establishing our eligibility under the Section 221 for federal credit. And in addition, it's crucial for finally getting us in front of Congress for a request for authorization for federal investment in the West Sacramento project. The board should also anticipate a visit from the Sacramento District Planning Manager, Alicia Kirshner, who will address the board on the 13th of December, providing an update on the Corps' activities generally and also the GRR. Other news in levee construction in the area, the project that's presently underway is the Corps Sac Bank setback levee project at the Barge Canal, just south of the Barge Canal. The Corps has encountered some complications in construction that are causing project delay, unfortunately, further. And also, this time of the year, the regulatory agencies, both the Central Valley Flood Protection Board and other environmental resources, prohibit construction activities on the river starting November 1 through the high water and winter months. So as a result of some construction complications and the shutdown for the winter, South River Road, unfortunately, will be closed likely through the duration of calendar year 2013. Sorry about that, but the Corps is doing its best to make sure that the taxpayers are going to get the value for their investment and that the community is going to get the flood protection it expects. And so it's working through those quality control issues. Other news on levees around the city, RD 900 is working to bring the South Cross levee, presently a private non-project levee, into compliance with the Corps of Engineers rehabilitation inspection program, which will enable qualification for funding of emergency repairs through the PL 8499 process. Immediate activities in advance of November 1 will consist of removal of vegetation encroachments, and hopefully following not too long after that, negotiations with PG&E will be moving forward so that we can pull out the power poles on the top of the levee. The RD will also be regrading the crown of the levee and repairing the access road, the patrol road on the crown. We expect to bring to the board a couple requests for professional services in November, because in addition to the actual work, we have to put together some documentation for Army Corps of Engineers certification process, and we'll need consulting help to do that. Also, because some of the vegetation encroachments are elderberry bushes, we'll have to go through the federal permitting process to remove those bushes. So we'll be bringing a couple contracts to the board in November to execute that work. On to another topic, I wanted to compliment recent work by Crocker & Crocker, who's prepared another informational insert that will be distributed to the north area through utility bills, essentially explaining the importance of the community's investments and urgency of the community's investments in flood risk reduction, and asking for the community's patience and with us as we work through the work, and appreciation for the imposition of inconvenience and some occasional more adverse effects on private property owners in order to meet the community's needs for flood risk reduction. In pursuit of other activities related to floodplain management, staff has prepared the annual recertification process for a community rating system. Again, this is part of our work with FEMA and the ISO to keep insurance rates down. So that package is winding its way up to the city manager for his signature and will be submitted shortly. So last of my list of updates, and again, if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to provide an answer. Back on the Central Valley Flood Protection Process and the Regional Flood Management Plan, in addition to the pursuit of the DWR direct funding grant, we will also be soliciting statements of qualifications for 2 additional consultant services. One for outreach services, to make sure that as we do the plan, we're able to reach all the interests that need to be connected, and do so in a way that's meaningful, that's productive, but also mindful that other stakeholders may not have a lot of time to engage in the planning work. And also environmental assistance. The flood management planning process is occurring in a geography that has a lot of other things going on in it related to environmental resources. An example is the BDCP and other studies, the OCAP. And we want to make sure that as we're working through flood risk reduction issues, that we're being mindful of the potential intersections and overlap with other agency studies that will eventually influence state funding decisions. That concludes my presentation on the flood program. If there are any particular questions, maybe I can provide additional information.
I have one on the 2011 EIP, the Rivers Phase 1 site. The execution of DWR license to install a water supply connection at DWR MA4. Where in the heck is that at?
We actually, it's been executed. It took a long time. We apologize for that. But the agreement has been executed. We now have legal ability to connect up to a water supply at the maintenance area 4-yard. We're really happy about that. It's a relatively short-term license to get us through construction, so pretty shortly Paul and his team will be rolling into a longer-term negotiation for we'll need a 10 to 15-year lease to make sure that the vegetation that's planted has enough water to get established.
Question. Yeah, one question I have is Sac Regional and their pump station, or our pump station down in south portion of our city, our southern borders. They're indicating that they want to build a ring levee around the pump station for future protection. Has that been coordinated with our staff and everything so that it doesn't interfere with what we're doing as far as segment B is concerned?
Yes, it has.
Okay.
Staff's been closely engaged and has, there's been a number of conversations, quite a bit of additional analysis. We were a little bit concerned about how close the borrow excavation that would be occurring would be to the Sacramento River levee. And there were subsequent geotechnical analyses that our team had a chance to review, and at this point we believe the pathway that they're on is the right one.
Super. Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Informational items, number 8.
I wanted to note for the record, in response to requests from representatives of CCON up in Segment F, the board did receive a letter, correspondence from CCON dated the 14th of September, and Chairman Denton, you distributed a response to CCON dated the 4th of October, so that communication circuit has occurred.
I have one more. I read a report that was generated by our staff as far as the true-ups for state funds, DWR, and everything. There's a very large lag time, and so I guess what I'd like to have is a future agenda item, or at least a report that talks about how these true-ups are going to get done in an expeditious manner so that we can pay all of our contractors, because there is a large lag time between. They have a policy where everything, every I, every T, everything has to be dotted and crossed, and there's a large lag time before they make their final true-up. And so I know that staff's been working on some kind of a formula, or working with DWR and working with especially our large contractors, so that we can in turn make payments in a 30, 60, 90-day period, whereas we really don't get the money for, it could be for a long time. There could be, for whatever reason, could be litigation, could be all these other factors that can come into delaying those state dollars. So at a future meeting or at either an agendized item or just a memo or something explaining how all of that works, because I know that you guys have been working on it, but it's a tricky problem. It's tough. It's not easy. So
We can do that.
okay.
Just by way of response, would you prefer a presentation item, or would you prefer a technical memorandum distributed to the board?
I don't know the flavor of the board. I don't know what they would like to have, but you know, it's a budget issue and a money issue. So
I think that was listed before in some prior financial reports, what the balance was. But, perhaps it could be put in there again.
okay,
Okay,
that'll work.
very good. So we'll bring this back as a presentation item to the board. All right.
The Kim McDonald has on item 8, an informational item that basically is a question also. So Kim, if you would like to.
Let's see here. I was given a map of the proposed access to the properties that are left on South River Road after the project. And first of all, I was not notified of any meeting, and so I luckily got this from a neighbor. And even though I have basically an acre left of my property, if it goes forth as is, there is no anything on this map which shows any access to my property. And so I was wondering if this oversight means that you're anticipating taking the whole thing instead of leaving me an acre to rebuild on. And the further question that goes with that, as it stands now, I have to give access to people to the property behind me. There's multiple accesses and easements. If then a road is coming in reverse direction, there's a natural reverse egress type of thing where I would have to grant people access through my property to the river, because you're not allowed to block off access that's been there before to waterways like at the coast and at the lakes and stuff like that. And I'm wondering if you guys are going to do anything about people, fishermen, or people wanting to use the designated parkway, bikeway back there, coming in and parking on property and causing a hazard as far as people being able to legally be there through the middle of the night and such. And there is partying and stuff that goes on the river, and I could see it as a source of problem. And that's two things that I would sort of like answered. If there is going to be another meeting on the roadways and stuff, I would like to know when it was going to be.
You betcha. We'll make sure that you receive an invitation. Right now, we're looking at a day in the week of the 22nd. So I'll ask Lucy's staff to follow up with you.
Thank you.
You betcha.
Going to take care of that.
Yes, sir.
I guess that includes the informational items. Meeting's adjourned.